Otherwise, I'm going to start off by making a slab. So I've got a hunk of clay. This is like 2 or 3 big handfuls that I've wedged a little bit. Don't have to wedge it crazy, you know, because we're going to turn it into a slab here in just a second. So it's just pretty much it's a little ready to go. I don't need much of a slab for a mug or a cup. One rule of thumb is if you're trying to figure out the diameter, how big does your slab need to be? So if you make your hands, you know, you want a little mug, do you want a big mug, do you want a big mug, you know, so kind of hold your hands. So this distance needs to be how wide your slab is. So I've got, it's going to get a little noisy here while I do this, but so I've got a work table. If you've got like a piece of wood at home or something, that works out well. So I'm just flattening this out. Alrighty. Alright, so I'm just using my hands to get this started. So now that I've got my slab started, I'm going to throw it out. So just like this. If you need to make it longer one way, let's rotate it 90 degrees. And this is eventually going to stretch it out. You might not need as much clay as I have. I'm hoping to get a couple mugs worth out of this slab. My wife, Rachel, may be joining us here. We'll see. She just went for a run, so she probably wants to get cleaned up a little bit first. So now that I've got it most of the way flattened out, it's about the size of a, should be plenty long. Do one more throw here. It's about the size of like maybe a 14-inch pizza. You can also use a rolling pin now. This does 2 things. It helps compress the clay after you just did all that stretching, and you can actually, it does help make the slab a little more even. If you want to get really fancy, you can get square dowels to put along the sides here to help you roll as a guide, so you roll everything really even. And whenever I rolling pin or smooth stuff out, I do it on both sides. So I did it this direction on this side, so I'm going to do it the opposite direction on the other side. So I'm going to pick this up, lay it back down. There's some tools in the way. There we go. So I've got my slab all laid out. At this point, I could put some texture into it if I wanted some texture. So that could be, let me grab a couple stamps. I could kind of mix it up if I wanted to. So I'm going to put some of these on, and I'm going to alternate some patterns so it's a little more patchwork quilt looking. If your stamps start to stick to the clay, you can do 2 things. You can use some cornstarch, works really well. If you don't want to use cornstarch, you can also use water, but with the soft slabs, you don't necessarily want to be introducing a lot more water. You don't want them softer than they already are necessarily. All right, so these are kind of random patchwork looking. So I can either freeform this or I can use a support to help me make the shape of my mug. So I'm going to show you how you can use the support. You can use something like a pop can to wrap the slab around just to kind of help you get the shape that you need. If you wanted a bigger one, you can use like a mason jar or PVC pipe or any sort of round-ish object that's vaguely the size that you want to be working with. So you can use your normal clay tools. Stuff that you can find in your kitchen is also super helpful, like kebab sticks or popsicle sticks, different sizes or whatnot. So I'm going to take my knife. I'm going to cut this right along here. And I have two options here. I can either try to hide the seams, or I can try to emphasize the seams, which I think is what I'm going to do. I'm going to let the seams be there. Don't need to hide from them. So I don't want to get rid of my slab yet, so I'm just going to gently fold this over. I'm going to need some portions of it again for like the bottom. But I'm just going to set this off to the side here. All right, so I'm going to slowly pick this up. If your fingers can't lift it off because it's stuck, if you take something that's like flat and straight, you can kind of lay it right along the edge here and pick up the whole edge with that, and you're less likely to distort it with your fingers. All right, so now I've got my soft slab, and I'm going to stand it up. You'll see it stands up just fine. This is going to make a pretty healthy sized mug. Now at this point, I have two options. I'm going to show you guys the seam. I can butt them together. Let's get these curved a little bit more. So I can slip and score to butt them together, right? Or I can do some sort of overlap or something in between. So one of the surefire ways that I've found that works is this is just a little bit wider than I need it to be, and I'm actually going to overlap these patterns by one square, just like that. So these are overlapped by a square. I've got them lined up. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this seam apart at a 45-degree angle, and then that angle is going to match each other up, and I can slip and score them together. And this is also where I'm going to be putting the handle. So I'm just cutting straight through at, make sure these are stuck together-ish. There we go. Straight through at about a 45, so you can see that beveled edge. And now those are going to line up really well. All right. So now that I've got that, I am going to slip and score. Now you can use any sort of tool. Forks work well for slipping and scoring. I'm more of a wet and scratch kind of person. This is pretty soft clay to begin with, so I'm just dipping this in some water and scoring right up the side of this. Being careful not to muddle up my texture too much. And do it to the other side. I'm a little less concerned about mussing up the inside because I can smooth that out pretty easily. Alright, but that's nice and wet and sticky now. So I'm going to take that now. When I stick these together, I must support the inside, and I actually don't want to push too hard because that's going to distort the form. So you can take something to help you support the inside to press against. So I'm just going to set this right on the inside of my seam. So I have something nice and sturdy to push against. There we go. So you can see where the seam is because the texture changes, but the nice part about this is there's not much, you can't really see much on the inside what's going on. So I'm just going to take the edge of my tongue depressor here, my popsicle stick, and run it up the inside to smooth that out on the inside. Get that clay to marry it into each other. So I did that on the top as well. And now I'm going to do it on the bottom. Well, I can make any side whichever I want it to be at this point. So now I need to add a base to it. So I'm going to get out a hunk of my slab that I had set off to the side before. There we go. All right, so this is going to be my bottom. And so I'm going to set this on there. Now, if I want to get this really, really circular, if you have something that's close to circular that you can shape it around, that'll help. I've got a ball jar here, just a glass jar that I can just go this way on one side. And that really rounded that part out. And then I can do it on the top as well. Really gently. I don't want to pop that seam that I made apart, but it's much more round now. At this point, you probably want to work on a board. So let me just, there we go. A small board, just because it makes it easier to pick everything up and whatnot. So I hear Rachel coming to join in. I'm going to move over a little bit.
Hey guys!
So this is the live, sorry. And then that's the other video that I'm going to post if this doesn't work well.
Okay. Hi guys!
We've got backup video going on. So I'm just going to mark where I need to slip and score. I'm going to mark the inside of my mug really carefully. Can take this off. And now I have a little drawn circle so I can scratch and wet. How's it going?
I'm waiting for my spot.
Right here.
I don't have it.
There's another chair right there. I'm sitting on a chair because otherwise my head doesn't fit in the video camera.
That sounds like a personal problem, honey. This is why I'm not allowed usually in these videos.
All right. So I am just scratching away here. Hi Vicky, I see that you're here by the way. I'm sorry if I've missed some comments or something. I'll try to come back and comment on them after the video's done. They weren't showing up at first, so they seem to be showing up now.
So, for those of you who don't know, hi, I'm Rachel. I took a pottery class in college. I am not artistic though whatsoever. I was told...
Debatable.
I was told by our pottery teacher who taught Andrew how to throw that it was better if I didn't touch the clay. So he still thinks it's hilarious to this day. So I'll show you some of. I did a lot of slab building when I was in my hand building class. Oh, what did people say?
That's just Diane.
Okay.
Dee's watching.
Okay. So, so for those of you who have been told it's better if you don't touch the clay, I'll show you what I do to not touch the clay but still make something that could have then be graded. You just think it's hilarious that George told me that.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I have here a very simple cup that Andrew has thrown and glazed. I typically would be using plaster, but this works just as well.
It's a wee shot glass.
It's a baby shot glass.
All right, so I've slipped and scored both the bottom of the cylinder and my slab. So I'm just applying some downward pressure gently and evenly. And wiggling a little bit. It got folded a couple times, so it was out of the way. Make yourself at home. Move anything around.
How is that different from what I usually do?
All right. So now that that's mostly stuck down, I'm going to clean up the inside of that. If you were using a popsicle stick, you could cut one end square so you can get in there to smooth stuff out. I'm actually going to use the back side of, I have a trimming tool here that's got a flat bottom, so I'm going to actually use the bottom side of that. So I'm just smoothing out the inside.
So what I'm doing as Andrew's smoothing that out is I'm taking a very small slab that he's done, and I'm literally just laying it over my baby shot glass. And so this is a fairly wet slab, so in order for it to work a little bit better and to get a cup like what I want, I say I don't really want to, I don't want to cut, so I'm just going to fold, is how I went about this in
Rachel's
college.
essentially using the cup as a hump mold, or a drape mold to put it over. So I've got a dry brush that I'm using to finish cleaning this up on the inside. What do you need?
This to be damper.
Damper?
Yes, I need some water.
There's a squirt bottle or there's a bucket here.
There we go. That'd be nice.
No misting me. You can only mist the pots.
Oops. I missed. I aimed for the pots.
I'm wet. All right. So now I'm gonna cut off my slab. I'm gonna do it really roughly to start with. And now I'm just gonna rock this around the circle a little bit.
What did you do to this slab?
There's a
Cut it.
kink in it. There's a kink in your slab, Rachel. Sorry.
I blame you.
I had to make the slab without you. You were late.
I was running.
I know. I told them that.
I'm training for a marathon and he's being a jerk butt. So if you can mock him when you see him next, I would appreciate it.
Alright, so I'm rolling this, tapping, so I'll move this a little closer to the camera so you can see it. But it's lifted up a little bit, so it's ready to be trimmed a little better. So I can see the little dent from where I was rocking it on the top. So that's close to where I need to start trimming. I'm going to use my wire knife. You can also use a regular knife or a loop tool, or you can use, I've seen people use, like, you can take like a piece of wire, a bobby pin, and bend it. I made a little homemade tool the other day. Hi, Anya. Rachel's running the Monona Terrace one in Madison in Labor Day weekend.
Labor Day weekend.
Labor Day weekend.
Andrew won't be there because it's more important for him to sell pots than to come see me run.
Third Ward Art Festival's that same weekend. So I'm just using this to cut off my extra clay. And I'm definitely a little bit at a time, so you don't take off too much school of thought on these. Now I'm going to set it right side up again. And I've got pretty much all the extra removed. So at this point, I'm going to take a tool and smooth that out. I'm going to use, I've got a popsicle stick here, will work really well for just taking this, and I'm just smoothing that right into the mug, so I have a nice finished surface. Hey, Colleen.
Hi, Colleen.
What's Oh No? I don't know what Oh No was. Did you have an Oh No moment?
I don't know. I didn't think I did, unless
Okay,
maybe.
I don't know.
I don't know. I usually don't know if I have an oh no moment until I realize something went very wrong at the end. So, I mean, that's life.
Alright, so I'm just smoothing out my bottom with this here lovely popsicle stick. And I want to re-round my top. So like I said, I found this, canning jar that is just wider than, I'm just using that to make sure my rim stays nice and round. And the last step, I could just leave it like this, but the big thing that's going to make a difference here is fixing this rim is really squared off right now, and we want it to be beveled on the inside so it's a little easier to drink out of, and so the lip itself is a little thinner. I'm going to use my fettling knife to do that.
So fancy.
You can just, fettling knife's like a butter knife. So I'm just getting rid of some of that extra clay. Smoothing out my seam again when I get to my seam. So I'm cutting this at steeper than a 45-degree angle. I'm supporting the outside.
If you can see what I'm making, this is why I don't do pottery full time.
This isn't there.
This is why, this is why I do science.
She's the brains and the looks. I just make dishes.
Not true.
So I'm supporting the outside while I'm cutting the rim.
You won't be there to cheer Rachel on. That is correct. He won't be.
Her family is planning on coming.
No, they're not.
Wasn't Haley going to be there?
Haley doesn't know what her schedule is because she's a medical student.
Oh.
So I could have no family. I'm trying to convince Alyssa to come.
I've got a little sponge, or a chamois works well too, that I'm getting everything rounded off nice right on the very rim. If you want to go through and you can pinch it a little bit, which is going to compress the rim a little bit. If your clay starts to get a little cracky, especially if you have some texture where it gets some thin spots. Pinching it to compress a little bit's a really smart idea.
But don't touch the clay. That's what. Anyways. Just saying. You can explain that. I'm still
Only
bitter.
touch it as much as you need to. All right. So now that I've got that set, and I've got a decent rim, I'm going to check for round one more time. There we go. So we've got our start of our mug here. And I'm just using my thumb to check the bottom here. Like I said, this is like fresh out of the bag consistency clay. So you have to be pretty gentle with it. I've got a couple little bloops on the bottom I need to...
Bloops, it's a technical term.
Yep. Boogers and bloops on the bottom that I had to clean up. So I am going to let this just set on my little board here and firm up a little bit while I get started on making a handle.
Okay, honey, comment on my stuff now.
I don't have anything to say about your stuff.
This
What do
is
you
why
want me
we're
to
still
say?
married.
This is the top?
Yes, that will be the top.
Okay.
Kind of hard to be a bottom if it's not even.
Well, I don't know. Give it a little footies. So this one's just going to get a coil handle that I'm going to put a little bit of texture on the outside of the coil. So I'm squeezing some of the leftover slabs into a vague coil before I start rolling it.
No, but you can show
All right, so this is going to be my handle. Just a regular coil is a little on the boring side. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm just going to toss the coil flat down on the table, once on either side. So it's a little more oblong. I find that that's a little more comfortable with my hands.
Because he has fat hands.
He's got big fingers. And now I'm looking at my mug here. And I want to think about where this is going to connect. So probably come out like this, like 3 of my big fat fingers. So like 4 normal people fingers.
I'm stealing part of this one.
That's why I made it.
Okay.
So Rachel's adding a bottom to hers. So I'm just cutting the ends off my coil of clay. I'm leaving lots and lots of clay for me to work with. This is still a lot longer than what I really need. Not easy to do on a card table. Yeah, you might want to think about maybe if you have like a piece of wood that you can throw your clay out on like a kitchen counter, or if you have an island or something, that might be a better place to start, and then move it to your card table to do your actual working. I know sometimes I'll bring clay up in the evening to work while we're watching TV, and I just have like a 2 foot by 2 foot piece of plywood that I work on when I do that stuff.
It also saves me from yelling at him for dirtying up our table. You know,
So
because I have clay dust everywhere else. I don't want it there.
yeah, so I am going to start to bend this, and where I'm bending it, I'm compressing it, I'm pushing it in at the same time. So I'll have a relatively stiff handle. Can I see your hand, Rach? I'm going to use your, just as a size. So I want it to be a little, all right. I'm looking at the height, so there's way too much, I'll move this over here. So there's way too much extra clay. That's sticking way too far off. But it can be a little, it doesn't have to be quite as big. So I'm just bending this down a little more. There we go. So this is the start of my handle. Now, the outside, I had a nice, lovely texture on my piece, so I'm going to take this stamp. I'll do the one with the triangles on it.
Where's your scoring for adding the bottom?
There you go.
Thanks, babe.
And feel free to use the water. So I'm just adding some texture onto the outside of my handle. And I'm going to use my thumb as kind of a measurement device so I know how far to cut this. So the top and the bottom attachments are going to be the same. I'm just draping it over my thumb and cutting at thumb width. I'm going straight down. And I'm going to do it on the other side. Cutting straight down. And now I'm going to be able to attach this. Hey Gail and hi Dee. How sharp is the bevel? The bevel is not that sharp. Close up time. There's lay bevel. So not that sharp.
And he just flopped it.
I just dropped it. We're going to save it though. It's okay. Whoopsies. Oh no! We'll fix it. The benefits of soft slabs are that they can still get bent and reshaped and re-rounded. There we go. It's a little less perfect, but that's okay.
Don't touch the clay too much, honey.
Yeah. All right. So I have my handle. My two ends of my handle, I'm going to slip and score. So I've got some water. So I'm wetting and scratching and wetting and scratching. Then I'm lining this up, and I'm lining it up with the seam. I'm just going to touch up a little bit. If you're worried about your seam coming undone, you can add a little flat coil on the inside and smooth that in. I have to touch it up a little bit here after it took a tumble.
That's usually my job, because if you throw something that's big enough, you can't reach down.
Yeah, some of the last vases I had to put a coil in the base, and my big fat arms didn't fit down into the bottom, so Rachel had to help me make the vases. So I found my seam, which is right here, and I'm just going to line this up where I want them to attach, and I'm just leaving myself a little mark of slip on there. So I can use that so I know where I'm adding water and scratching and scratching. Alright, so I'm going to stick the bottom and top. There we go. I'm supporting the interior. And I'm pushing the clay into the handle. And then I'm going to the bottom, pushing the clay into the handle and the handle into the clay.
I'm going to add a coil if you want me to show it.
And then round this again because I got big fat hands. And Rachel's going to be adding a coil on the inside of her pot, so I'm going to let her show that.
So what I am doing, so what you've seen is I started with this. It's not a very traditional mug, but I'm not an artist, so I wasn't going for it. So I've added a bottom to it, but I'm not very happy with it not leaking at the edges from where I've attached it. So now I'm adding a coil. And so I've added it I'm trying to see. Let me see if I can get you to see the
Hold
light.
it under the light here, and then point it.
Oh, honey, you do this. You're this. I'm not the on-screen talent.
Yeah. So if you.
So essentially, what I'm going to do. So I'm taking some clay that I cut away from the bottom, and I'm just making a very thin strip. And I do it in tiny pieces because it's more manageable for me to do it that way than to try and do one big long coil. And so then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay it right down into an edge. Thanks, hon. I'm laying it down right into an edge. So if you can, so now if you, I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, you can. So now you can see that coil is right in there. So I'm going to then use my fingers, or if it's a really long something and it's hard for you to get it all the way in there, you can use a brush, and you're going to wet it, and you're just going to really try and work it into that edge, and it's another way to reinforce to make sure you don't get leak from that adhesion joint that's going to be weaker if you don't do it like this. Or you can be like Andrew and just really good at it, and then it doesn't matter.
Well, it's not a bad idea. So I've attached, and then I just ran my rubber shaper and cleaned up the edges where I attached the handle. And we've got a nice kind of MUG mug here. Once this is stiff, what I'll do is the bottom of it, I'll take my a vegetable peeler, and I'll just bevel the bottom edge right underneath here. And I can clean up if I see any sharp spots. I'll clean that up once it's like a stiff leather hard. So this is just going to sit off to the side. Ooh, gotta sign your work. So I've got my little stamp.
I don't have a stamp.
Rachel doesn't have a stamp. Sorry, honey.
I don't make pottery on a regular basis. I'm too busy, doing other stuff. Like saving puppies and...
Yeah, we currently don't have any puppies in our house right now. The last two from our last litter went home.
Tonight. We went from 15 2 weekends ago to we have 4.
Which is a much more manageable number of doggos.
The 15 was a little crazy.
Yeah, we had puppies from 2 different litters.
Don't do it, it's a bad idea.
All right. It'll be fine. I believe in you. So, I'm going to set this off to the side,